Hi, Brian Lehrer here. Up next, Brian Lehrer Weekend. 3 of our favorite segments from the week packaged together for you to listen to on the weekend. So enjoy, and I'll see you back on the radio Monday at 10 a.m. on WNYC and WNYC.org. It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. Good morning again, everyone. And now Season 1, Episode 1 of Ask the Mayor for the Mamdani administration. My questions and yours for mayors around Mamdani. Call or text 212-433. WNYC today for people in the 5 boroughs. As I said before the news, we'll open it up to the whole region in some future appearances, but we want to begin by offering this access first to people he was elected to serve per se. 212-433-9692. Call or text. I will also bring in a few of the questions that some of you submitted through the Brian Lehrer Show newsletter and yesterday's pre-Ask the Mayor call-in segment. And good morning, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for doing this, and welcome back to WNYC.
Good morning, Brian. It is such a pleasure to be back on. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Thank you very much. And I see you just finished an event launching the first part of your number one campaign promise, free universal childcare. Applications are now open as of today, I see, for 2-year-olds in 5 selected school districts, 2,000 available slots in Upper Manhattan and parts of the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens. How did you pick which neighborhoods to launch in?
We started this as the first step of what is a vision that will deliver free childcare for every 2-year-old by the end of 4 years. And we wanted to start with the neighborhoods that have often been left behind in our politics, the neighborhoods where we see the highest need, the highest demand, and also the quickest ability to scale up. Because as Senator Warren often says, childcare is infrastructure, and we need to be able to deliver this on a timeline of this fall. It'll be 2,000 seats. Next year will be 12,000 seats. And then, as I said, by the end of year 4, a seat for every single 2-year-old.
And what would it take to accomplish that? More tax changes, or how do you get all the way there?
We've seen part of that path through just these last few months, where we partnered with the governor to secure $1.2 billion to not only fix the issues that we had seen with 3K, but also to create, for the first time in New York City history, 2K for free for New Yorkers. That funds it for not only this year, but also the expansion of 12,000 seats next year. And then we would continue this work to expand it all the way to every child. That's something that I'm incredibly excited to do with the governor. She's spoken time and time again of her commitment to the cause of universal childcare, and I share that same commitment. And I would say that to New Yorkers who are excited to sink their teeth into this program, the best thing that they can do right now is to go to myschools.nyc, which is where they can actually apply for a seat in this program.
Myschools.nyc, good for everybody with very little kids to know that. I mentioned that we invited potential questions for you in our Brian Lehrer Show newsletter last week. Here's one that came in through that, relevant to the 2K program. It says, with the expansion of universal childcare, what ways will you ensure the workforce is compensated as they should be? As it currently stands, early childhood workers and community-based organizations are grossly underpaid compared to their counterparts in public schools. What do you say to that listener?
First, I want to just say thank you for that question and for that focus, because the only reason that we're able to dream of universal childcare is because of the work of early childhood educators across the city. And we've been having a number of conversations. A number of them have been headed by the executive director of our childcare office, as well as a few that I've sat in on myself. And in those, I've heard from a number of these community-based organizations of the struggles that they've been facing in keeping up with rising costs. And so as we expand access to a high-quality program, we're also incredibly proud that in our executive budget, we invested $40 million additional dollars to ensure that the rates that childcare providers are being paid better reflected the costs they're having to take on. And this is just a first step in what will be a long-term commitment to ensuring that no parent is being priced out of the city for having to raise their child here, and that no childcare provider is going to be priced out because they simply can't make ends meet.
Before we turn to things other than childcare. I do want people to know about a summer program that you announced for older kids. This is so important for families who can't afford like private summer camp. Want to tell us briefly about that?
Absolutely. First I have to say, Brian, that growing up in New York City, one of my favorite websites to go to was a website called NYC.go. And when I was growing up, it had a list of about 10 free things to do every week, every weekend. And I would use that as a way to plan my life and how my friends and I would explore our city. And I wanted to ensure that the experience of growing up in the city is one that isn't restricted solely to those who have enough money in their pocket, that it's one where every single child is encouraged to grow, to express themselves, and to have activities that they can lose themselves in. And so we found that so often we tell young people what not to do. We want to actually tell them what they can do. And so this website, which is nyc.gov/summer, it connects kids and teens to programs they'll actually be excited about. It's whether it's sports like soccer or basketball, or whether it's photography or gardening. This is for children to be able to see through an interactive map where they can find these kinds of activities. They can search by age, by zip code, by travel distance, and it also includes information about free summer meals, free citywide World Cup watch parties, celebrations, and we're so excited at the hundreds of activities that we're sharing at this time, and we can't wait to keep using this to share with New Yorkers all the opportunities at their fingertips.
Raina in Brooklyn is calling with, I think, a very different kind of question about her child. Raina, you're on
Okay.
WNYC with Mayor Mamdani. Hello.
Hi, happy Pride, Mayor Manzani, and to you too,
Happy
Brian.
Pride, Reina.
And you too.
Great. I've heard you speak on many occasions about the love and support you feel for trans New Yorkers. As the parent of a trans child who's lost their health care from NYU and is now part of their criminal subpoena, I appreciate your being an outspoken advocate, but our community needs more than words right now. We want to know what specific measures your administration will take to guarantee access to health care for trans children and adults. With the ongoing attacks from the federal government and lack of support from New York State, we need more than a Know Your Rights campaign. We need concrete legal protections and financial support from the city. What is your plan to back up your commitment?
Reina, first, I just want to say thank you for your advocacy and being on the front lines of this. And I want to send love to you and your family and having to deal with what is truly just cruelty from the federal government, because we all know that here in our city, every single New Yorker deserves access to comprehensive, life-saving health care. And my administration is committed to protecting that right and to ensuring that trans and gender nonconforming New Yorkers have the resources they need to live with dignity. And to your point, it's not enough to just celebrate pride in our language. It's not enough to just speak about the ways in which we will continue to ensure that this city remains a haven for queer people across not just the country, but the world. We're also proud to have committed over the course of our previous budgets, we've put forward $15 million to gender affirming care over the next 2 years to ensure that we can start to bridge the gap of the funding that has been stripped of this care. And alongside that, I'm proud to have created the first ever mayor's office of LGBTQIA plus affairs, which is headed by Director Taylor Brown, with a mission to advance equity and justice for LGBTQ plus New Yorkers across our city. And I say that because we know that this struggle is one that will continue for quite some time. And we see how queer New Yorkers disproportionately are facing higher levels of homelessness, of poverty. And I'm incredibly excited at us having an office led by such a stalwart New Yorker with a mission to illuminate the ways in which city government can actually deliver for New Yorkers in this way, because the work is frankly just beginning on this.
How specifically will that reopen access to gender affirming care for trans kids whose parents, like apparently the caller, want that if places like NYU are shutting it down over federal pressure?
The $15 million that we have committed is funding that would unlock exactly that. And it speaks to the fact that whether it's Reina's experience or so many others across the city, there are explicit consequences from both the cruelty that we're seeing from the federal government's policies and the decisions that are being made by private healthcare institutions here in New York City.
Raina, thank you for your call. We've been talking a lot about kids. Here's another question that kind of deals with the other end of the life spectrum from a Brian Lehrer Show newsletter response. And we get a lot of ones like this, Mr. Mayor. It says, will you commit to keeping traditional Medicare available for the hundreds of thousands of New York City retirees and not force us onto a Medicare Advantage plan?
First, I just want to say thank you for the service that these retirees have given to this city over decades. And we are focused on delivering excellence and quality healthcare for our employees, for our retirees. And I want to say very clearly, we are not reopening the former Medicare Advantage program.
So that's done. A lot of people must not know that it's done because we get a lot of calls and texts about this from retirees still worried that they're going to be funneled into this by the city and, and contract negotiations with some of the unions. You're saying this is dead?
Yes, I can say very clearly, loud and clear, we are not reopening the former Medicare Advantage program. And I think to your point, Brian, that there hasn't been widespread awareness of both our position as an administration as well as the fact that a lawsuit was settled. And we are very clear on the direction that we're moving. And it's one of delivering an excellence in quality healthcare for both employees and for our retirees.
All right, very clear. Let me ask you a budget question. The full state budget was finally passed a few days ago, as you know, with money to close the city's budget gap for the coming fiscal year. I'm curious how you would say the state budget sets up your remaining budget negotiations with City Council with the city's new fiscal year about to begin on July 1st. What do you still have to fight or negotiate for that Council may be on a different page about?
Now the process will begin of a conversation with our partners in the council on the ways in which we can deliver for the city. What I have to say, though, is that we're incredibly appreciative of the partnership we have with Albany, with Governor Hochul, with Majority Leader Stuart Cousins, with Speaker Hastie. And that partnership was one that yielded a budget where we taxed the rich, where we created a fairer balance between the city and the state, where we were able to restore fiscal stability, resolving a deficit of $12 billion without having to slash the services that people depend on, without having to ask working families to pay for a crisis that they didn't create. And what was also something that was of incredible excitement to many of us here at City Hall was that we were also able at that same time to make what would typically be one-time investments, whether into libraries or parks or cultural institutions, and instead baseline them. So they wouldn't be the subject of the negotiation with the council, but we could start to have a conversation that goes beyond whether we want to retain the services we provide and start to think about a city that goes further to meet the needs of New Yorkers.
Here's a budget question, I think, from
Please.
Marissa in Brooklyn. You're on WNYC with Mayor Mamdani. Marissa, hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Marissa.
It's you.
Hi. Hi. I'm Marissa, and I'm a part-time librarian who just graduated with my master's in library science, but I am also a parent of a public school students and a member of the advocacy group Librarians Equal Literacy, which is fighting to reverse the disastrous school librarian and library loss in our public schools that has been seen over the last 20 years. Mayor, when you were a student at Brock Science, almost every public school had a library and a librarian, but today fewer than 300 do. Last year, during your election campaign, you told us that your administration would work to bring back the school librarians. And yesterday, there was supposed to be a report from the DOE to release the numbers on the school librarians, but it hasn't shown up yet. And my question is, will your administration meet with our group and come up with like a real plan to bring back school librarians and libraries in our schools? And will you direct the Department of Education to release the report on the school libraries?
Well, thank you so much for your work, Marissa, and congratulations on your recent credentials. I think to your point, the importance of libraries is not one that is up for debate, whether with me or for so many New Yorkers. And I think even as you stated, when I was a student at Bronx Science, the library was a place of study. And even after that, trying to find my way in our city, there were many an hour that I spent at libraries across the five boroughs, especially at the Bryant Park Library, trying to figure out what it is that I wanted to do. And I think that New Yorkers deserve a place where they can explore their interests, where they can try, and in my case, where they can fail, and then where they can find their way afterwards. And I think I would absolutely be happy to direct my administration to have that meeting with your group. Would you mind just saying the name of the group one more time?
Sure. Librarians Equal Literacy.
Librarians Equal Literacy. Okay, I'll be sure to follow up
Great.
with my team to make sure that they have that meeting with you all, and then they'll figure out the plan from there.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
But if there is a decline in funding, for school librarians, I see on Gothamist this morning that you are adding around 500 NYPD officers, which is different than what maybe people think you campaigned on. So can you explain that increasing the size of the NYPD with all these other demands that some of your voters might think are a higher priority?
Yes. So over the course of the campaign, I spoke about the importance of keeping our budgeted headcount steady. When I came into office, I was informed of two things. One was that although the Bronx was of a comparative size and need to other boroughs, it had only one police zone, which is why we made the decision to split it into two patrol boroughs like there are in Manhattan, in Queens, in Brooklyn. The second is that we found that while our NYPD officers were receiving extensive training in the academy, they were not receiving enough ongoing training once they were on the job. We decided to strengthen that regular training so that officers can better do their jobs. Together, because of these two issues, we saw there's a slight increase in the budgeted headcount, and that is as a result of both of these.
From Marissa in Brooklyn, we go to Mars in Queens. You're on WNYC with Mayor Mamdani. Hi, Mars.
Hi, Mayor Mamdani. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you? Where are you in Queens?
In Southeast Queens. I wanted to talk to you actually about QueensLink. When you were campaigning, you said that you were in support of QueensLink, that you said that you were ready for QueensLink, but now you're walking back on your word, and now you're blocking QueensLink, but you know it would impact a bunch of Queens riders. You know, we live in a transit desert. Queens does not have as much access to public transport besides buses. So QueensLink would be able to help us to get around New York, and I feel like that you walking back on your word and blocking QueensLink doesn't make the most sense right now, especially knowing that we don't have as much access to transit.
So I really appreciate your advocacy, and I want to be very clear that we're moving forward with Queensway in a way that does not preclude future rail activation. And that is something that I've both made explicit within our administration. I know our administration has also made explicit to partners, and the Queens way that we are speaking about, it's 5 acres of new park space, a little less than a mile of new shared use greenway to the surrounding communities. All of this while the conversation still continues on the question of QueensLink. And I am someone who is firmly supportive of the importance of increasing public transit access. It is also part of a partnership with the MTA around their priorities of where that access will be expanded.
Mars, does that make you more enthusiastic about the mayor's direction on this?
Not quite, because it still feels like you're prioritizing a park over people being able to get to work, get to school, get to places reliably, and you say that you are staunchly supporting public transport, but you know, this is kind of like a contradiction, and like you say one thing, but then you're doing another within your policy.
Mr. Mayor.
So I think the key issue here is that QueensLink is not something that could be built over a year or 2 years or 3 years. It's going to require immense partnership and interest at the state level, especially from the MTA. In the interim amount of time, I think that it's important for us to be able to deliver a park for those who need more green space. And the delivery of a park does not preclude us from any kind of future rail activation. The cost of a park is something that would be of a minimal amount compared to what the cost of any expansion would be when it comes to QueensLink. And so I think the question really here is that between, do we want to just wait and not do anything as we look for that interest at the state level, or do we want to deliver a park as we also continue to have that conversation? And for me, I think it's important that we continue to deliver as we also continue to deliberate on the question of the expansion of public transit.
Morris, thank you for your call. Listener writes in a text message, was it a mistake to skip the Israel parade, breaking with previous mayors and inviting criticism that you're partisan to your own religion? What would you say to that listener?
I would say that I've made clear over the course of the campaign that I was not going to be marching in this parade. And I've also made clear that this parade, which is the Celebrate Israel parade, is one that has featured, and we saw just recently, a number of far-right ministers, including Minister Smotrich, whose rhetoric and actions represent a vision of annihilation, a complicity in genocide, and a disregard for the lives of Palestinians. And I'm deeply offended by his presence as well as the presence of other right-wing ministers in our city. And I've also, as I've made those criticisms of the Israeli government abundantly clear, I also have been explicit about the fact that my responsibility as the mayor is to ensure that every New Yorker can gather and express themselves safely, and that need not be dependent on my presence at any event. And so at my direction, the city put in place extensive security measures to ensure the event proceeded safely, which it did on Sunday. And this is a conversation that we're having about political expression, about a foreign government. When it comes to the conversation around Jewish New Yorkers in our city, my administration is fully committed to their safety, as well as to ensuring that the bar is not simply that of safety, but also that we as a city celebrate and cherish our Jewish communities across the 5 boroughs.
Was your decision to skip that parade because of Israel's military operations in Gaza and Lebanon and other things about the current government that you were just citing? Or would you have skipped it anyway because you don't think fundamentally that Israel should exist as a Jewish state?
I've said time and time again that I believe in Israel's right to exist as a state with equal rights for all, and that's a key part of my belief of the world. From one part to the other is the importance of equal rights for people wherever they may be. And in many ways, it is something that I deeply appreciate about our country. And yes, to this moment in time, the Israeli government is carrying out a genocide in Gaza. We are seeing the continued killing and injuring of civilians in Lebanon. I recently saw a statistic about, more than 10 Lebanese children were being killed or injured every single day by a recent count. This is what we're talking about. And marching in that parade were ministers who have not only spoken in support of these activities, but who have been core constituencies to ensuring that genocide could be carried out and could continue to be carried out. And it is not something that I am interested in being a part of.
Right. But to be clear, the answer to my question is for both of those reasons. Fair?
I think that when there is a parade that is celebrating a government that is violating international law, that is not a parade that I want to be marching in.
Another text question. Listener writes, hi, Mayor Mamdani. My 3rd grader and I canvassed for you all over North Brooklyn, and we're both so excited to have you as our mayor. We're wondering if you're considering enacting a moratorium on AI in our public school classrooms, as that would go a long way to ensuring our kids are being taught by their teachers and not predatory ed tech companies. Also, as a teacher myself, the listener writes, I'm wondering if you've considered reducing screen time across the city. Teachers are catching the blame for students accessing inappropriate material on their school-issued laptops during class time. What do you say to that parent and teacher?
Well, first I have to say thank you for having canvassed, because without you, I wouldn't be sitting here as the mayor of our city. And I think that this question also comes as a reflection of the way in which AI is transforming our entire society. And we are firmly focused on developing a response to AI, not just for the city as a whole, but frankly also for our New York City public school system. And I want to just highlight our chancellor, who has been having a robust process of engaging educators, families, students, and experts for their feedback in that. And I think in some ways this also builds upon, to the screen time question, the bell-to-bell proposal, which is something that I supported, that Governor Hochul had led. And we've seen the results of that in making it easier for teachers to perform their duties in the classroom and for students to be able to focus. And given that our top priority is the safety, the well-being, and also the rigor of the classroom, I would absolutely consider any additional suggestions, including the one that was referred to of reduced screen time as part of that.
All right. Very ongoing conversation in the parents community, I know from our previous segments, so I think that's not the last you will hear about that. Gretchen on the Upper West Side, you're on WNYC with Mayor Mamdani. Hello.
Fantastic. Hello, Brian, and hello, Mayor Mamdani. I'm calling
Hi, how are
because
you?
Very well, thank you. I'm so glad to have this opportunity to ask you a question about street safety.
Absolutely.
For a little context, I'm a victim of a hit and run with an electric scooter last December. I was headed home at about 94th and Broadway at about 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and an electric scooter ridden by a young boy who looked to be 11 or 12 was going the wrong way down Broadway and crashed into me. I fell to the ground. I was immediately in excruciating pain. Thankfully, there was a Good Samaritan who called the police and an ambulance and my boyfriend. And before long, I was in an ambulance on the way to the ER at Lenox Hill Hospital. Happily, I was only in a situation that my L2 vertebra suffered a compression fracture. And a month of wearing a back brace and 4 months of physical therapy later, I'm almost back to normal and thankfully don't suffer chronic pain, for example. So I'm one of the lucky ones.
Gretchen, what's your question?
Yes, my question is that the street safety issue is so much more than food delivery riders on electric bikes. Every day there are thousands of electric and manual bikes and scooters going the wrong way. They're on sidewalks. They're ignoring traffic lights. I understand there are special issues around food delivery workers and ICE and your desire to protect them. I want to lift up the question to the broader issue of street safety and what you're doing with creative approaches to ensure street safety for everyone.
Thank you, Gretchen. Mr. Mayor.
Yes. First, Gretchen, I just want to say that I'm so sorry that happened to you. Our streets have to be safe for everyone. Pedestrians, cyclists, e-bike riders, drivers, anyone who is traversing through our 5 boroughs. And I know that one of the things that we as New Yorkers love to do, and it's a thing that makes our city so special, is to walk through our city. And I grew up not too far from where you suffered this accident. And I know that it changes a relationship that one has to their willingness to wander. And I truly am sorry that this is something that happened to you. And I think to that end, safety for me and for our administration, it is paramount. And everyone has to follow the law. And that means everyone, no matter what way or mode of transit that they are using. That's why we are strengthening safety standards. And to your question of creative approaches, there are a few things here. The first is expanding safety training for all e-bike and bicycle delivery workers. As you said, there are others across the city who bike. And so we're also enhancing city bike safety features and also pursuing an approach with app delivery companies that looks to strengthen accountability and really get to the heart of the business model they have that oftentimes incentivizes the breaking of road rules. Beyond that, I've also made very clear to our Department of Transportation an interest in changing our street infrastructure so that our emphasis on safety is not purely from a rules and regulatory approach, but also from the nature of the streetscape, whether it be in terms of the way we are dividing the road or in terms of the way that we are providing a separation between certain modes of transit, as well as speed bumps, a lot of other things that can incentivize safety in a manner that goes beyond the typical rules that a city will rely on. And I think that is something of immense interest to me because I want to make sure that there's no hierarchy of safety in our city. It should be the same no matter what mode of transit you're operating.
I know we're at the end of our time. I've got to throw this one in, and I think you won't be unhappy that I did. It says, since the mayor appealed my kids' bedtimes, we will watch the Knicks as a family on Friday. I'm very excited, but please ask if he can provide Saturday morning childcare to deal with my sleep-deprived, cranky children.
This is what they call an unfunded mandate in city government. I have to apologize to the parents for the morning after, but I'm very glad to hear that there will be compliance with our executive order, and we are all thinking it. So I'll just say it out loud. Let's go Knicks, because it's an incredible moment. It always is to be a New Yorker, but this summer the chance to go back to 1999 and have a different result, the chance to win a championship for the first time since 1973. It feels like the entire city is alive with that possibility. Thank you so much, Brian. It's been a real pleasure.
It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. Good Monday morning, everyone. Good June 1st morning again, everyone. And today starts Pride Month, where we celebrate the LGBTQ plus community, and with diversity in general and the trans community specifically facing such rollbacks in protection. Many are probably drawing on the inspiration of the early heroes from Stonewall, people like that, and the first Pride marches in 1970 or so. That impulse to look past heroes, or look to past heroes, for guidance and support in tough times is very much in keeping with the idea behind my next guest's book. Writer Antonio Pagliarulo's new book is Queer Saints, a radical guide to magic, miracles, and modern intercession. You might have heard him on the show before, making the case for Father Michael Judge to be named a saint. His concept of sainthood is not quite the same as the Catholic Church's. I don't think the Church is about to canonize Saint Freddie Mercury, but let's have him explain. Antonio Pagliarulo, thanks for coming on again. Welcome back to WNYC.
Thank you, Brian, for having me. It's a pleasure.
So, as we've discussed before, your introduction to the idea of saints was through Catholicism, where there are certain specific steps that have to be followed before someone can be considered a saint. And you do include some recognized Catholic saints in the book, but your conception is much broader. So, in general, in your framework, what makes someone a saint?
Well, what makes someone a saint is you have saints are generally thought, as you said, to be canonized by the church. But what makes somebody a saint is they are people who have passed over, but they have done extraordinary things in this life. They have done very memorable things, revolutionary things, and they are people we call to for help, for intercession. But they are mainly marked by what they did in this life, and not by what an institution, gave them the title for.
And so the word magic is part of the subtitle of your book, as well as miracles. Do you distinguish between the two, or do you think both those things are real in the concrete world?
I do think they are real in the concrete world, and I do distinguish between the two. I mean, I think magic is what we do when we want to really bring, our abilities together to change consciousness at will, and miracles are what we see when we do that work, and when we put our, force and our will into our spirituality. And what we often get is a miracle. That's the result.
How do you call on saints in your own life? Tell us about the word intercession in your title. To me, intercession was my favorite part of the school year when I was in college. So how do you mean intercession?
When I was educated and raised, intercession was a lot about calling on saints through a lot of begging and through a lot of supplication. You kind of had to get down on your knees and state your purpose and make yourself believe that you were worthy and make them believe that you were worthy. But my definition of modern intercession says, you go to the altar and you will be altered because you are already worthy. There is no begging. You go and you ask for intercession because you are already worthy of that intercession, and you're worthy of the magic that it requires and the miracle that will come from it. So there's a lot of self-worth and knowledge of our own power. And that's what brings us to intercession. We don't go in modern intercession, I should say, we don't go about begging. And that's the old model. The new model takes us to a place where we look at ourselves first and we say, yes, I do need this assistance, or I do want this assistance, and I'm worthy of it. And that's where we start from.
Can you go a little further on that even? Like, who intercedes with whom?
Yes, of course. Well, when I talk about saint magic, there are specific practices that we can do. There's petitioning. There's the practice of writing a petition. There's the practice of lighting a candle, which is considered candle magic, which is done really, we call it candle magic, but it's done in so many places. But you begin by choosing a saint that you want to work with. And then you just begin by literally, the steps are simple. You quiet your mind, you quiet yourself, but you can do this anywhere. You don't have to be in a church, in a cathedral, in a sacred space. You can do this at your kitchen table. Your altar can be your windowsill, can be your desk, can be your kitchen table. That's what makes this something that's so accessible, and why so many people, I think, are coming back to saints. Because don't forget, saints were human, and that's what makes them, so, relational in terms of people saying, I can relate to that saint, because whatever we've gone through, the saints have gone through. But when we intercede, when we ask for intercession, we go before a saint, and we don't say, I need this help because I've done bad things, or I'm kind of not worthy and I need some sort of forgiveness first. That's not what it's about. It's about simply recognizing that we need assistance, and we're looking for leaders and examples to help us understand the world as we see it in this state right now, which is, quite frightening in many ways. So when we ask for intercession, we're asking to understand the world through clearer eyes. We're asking for strength and for more spiritual guidance.
Listeners, if you're just joining us, my guest is Antonio Pagliarulo, whose new book is Queer Saints, A Radical Guide to Magic, Miracles, and Modern Intercession, just in time for Pride Month. And maybe you've already adopted, listeners, an unofficial saint who you look to for inspiration and guidance. Have you? Name that person, 212-433-WNYC. And especially for today, for those celebrating Pride Month, are you looking back at anyone who fought for LGBTQ plus rights as you're looking, to today's challenges, as Antonio was just describing, as if you need to be reminded, who might be a queer saint, to use his term, for you? 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692. You can call, or you can text, or besides naming a saint, you can ask a question. Antonio, as I mentioned, the book includes a few actual Catholic saints who you feel embraced what today could be called queer identities, even in the 12th century, for example, as in the case of St. Francis of Assisi. Tell us about him in this context.
So growing up, there was never a time where I didn't know about St. Francis of Assisi. But as I got older, he has long been a figure, sort of a queer saint, and certainly in the LGBTQ community, because this goes back to the question of what do we mean when we say queer here. It is not only about identity. To be queer is to do something that is revolutionary, that is radical, something that really changes the perception and goes against the established norms and convention. And that's what St. Francis did. When he was the son of, wealthy parents. When he went in the town square and stripped himself, of all of his clothes, that was a very transformational act. And he said, I'm going to dedicate myself to the poor and to lepers and to helping people. He wasn't supposed to do that. That was very revolutionary. And that not only, of course, transformed him and the people he worked with, but it transformed the world. I mean, his order has been strong for hundreds of years. So he went ahead, including, and it goes right up to, modern, someone in my book who's considered a modern saint, who's Father Michael Judge. But St. Francis did these radical acts. And for that reason, he's very much looked at as queer. He railed against established ideas and norms and said, I'm going to love everybody. I'm going to serve everybody. That's the message. There is no sense of hate. And, when I was a kid, my nuns used to tell the story, and I don't know if this particular story is true, but they used to tell the story about his love for animals and the environment was so great that when in his hair, he sort of grew his hair in a certain way, so that there was enough room for, animals and bugs and vermin to sort of reside, because he just wanted them to have a home. So his sense of love and his sense of wanting community and to build that community was very radical and very brave. And in the book, I say that queer is the identity of the brave.
To show the range of the, quote, queer saints in your book, I see that you include Saint Judy Garland. Tell us why in her case.
I do include Saint Judy Garland because, well, she's long been an icon of the queer community, and there are, well, she's for not only a queer ally, but she's a singer. She's known for being very much of an icon. When she died on June 22nd, there's often a correlation that is made between that time frame from when she died and the Stonewall riots. And but that's often seen as an urban legend, but you can see the connection because it goes from Judy's death into the Stonewall riots. But she's long been a queer icon, and she still remains that.
Charles in Harlem has one, I think. Oh, is he ready? Can I go to Charles? On line one. There we go. Charles in Harlem, you're on WNYC. Hello.
Oh, my God, so fast. I'm from Harlem. I was actually raised in Philadelphia by a good Baptist grandmother, so she would not be she would, we were baptized the right way, none of the sprinkles on the head or anything, and she was very much opposed to these saint-like things of the Catholic Church. But having said that, if I had to think about this in a sort of, heterodox Christian way, I'd have to say James Baldwin. James Baldwin well, he's passed away, but he sort of represents a saint-like figure in that Christian mystical tradition. I mean, he was very much about love and how love is radical, and how sometimes you have to put your body on the line when it comes to living a life where you actually loved people. And he was also a preacher, so I think he fits that mold of being a saint. If I had to put a word to it, I
sure
think
enough. And Charles, thank you for your call. James Baldwin is in your book, right, Antonio?
Indeed, he is. St. James Baldwin is in my book, and he was everything that we've just heard. He's someone who really did talk about and write about love and the power of love in terms of, and his youth, defined by the Harlem Renaissance. He was an extraordinary figure. And you can see that through his writing today. It's just, timeless, and it's so meaningful to a queer readership.
My saint, a listener writes, is Saint Laurent, the genius fashion designer. Somebody else writes, intercession is asking a saint to go to Jesus to help you. A common interceder is the Blessed Mother to get her son to help out. Sound right to you?
This sounds correct, and I'm going to actually say that the interesting thing is that many people may not know that the practice of intercession, is not only about, lives in Christianity. It's a practice that is centuries old. It exists beyond the Catholic context. We see it in Judaism. We see it in many, many faiths. Now, interestingly, when we talk about the Blessed Mother, the Virgin Mary, there is, right in the beginning of my book, I talk about La Madonna di Montevergine, and there's a wonderful story. She's known as the Madonna of the queer people and the queer population and of the marginalized, because as the story goes, there was a shrine to her in Montevergine in Italy, and one day a gay couple was walking by, and they were hand in hand. They were in love, and the townspeople did not like that, and they beat the couple and they tied them up and left them for dead overnight, where it was believed they would be, sort of ravaged by animals. And in the middle of the night, in the midst of their plight, one of the two screamed out called out to the Virgin Mary and said, "Please save us. You must love us too." And in fact, as the legend goes, a beam of light sort of shot down and freed them of their chains. And when they came back down this mountain and went into the town the next day, the townspeople saw that they had no wounds and they were clothed again. And they said, "How can this be? We beat you. We left you for dead." And they told the story of a woman who came in the night and, blessed them and freed them. And they said that was the Madonna. And so the townspeople said, "Well, that must mean that she loves you too." And so thus became the tradition of the Madonna of Montevergine, and it goes on today. On February 2nd, which is the Feast of Candlemas, it's called La Candelora in Italy, and by the busload, people go up the mountain and up into the town of Montevergine to give thanks and to ask for her intercession. And many queer people go up and give their, thanks and their gratitude and their love for all of that. So it happens.
Michael
even
in
today.
Manhattan has a potential saint for the book or for the informal list that follows the book. Michael, you're on WNYC. Hello.
Thank you very much. I wanted to add to the list of someone who I think really has not been acknowledged. His name was Tom Stoddard, and he was at the New York Civil Liberties Union in the 1980s and 1990s. Unfortunately, he died in the late 90s. At the time, I'm not gay. I worked at the American Civil Liberties Union, and I used to call on Tom for help on matters having nothing to do with gay rights. He was a wonderful, intelligent, kind, incredible lawyer. And one time, I'll never forget, he wrote an op-ed in the New York Times about the issue of same-sex marriage at a time when no one was ever talking about it. And he made the point something I had never thought about before. And he made the point so powerfully and eloquently. And I think he really got through to people like myself. And then years later, same-sex marriage was recognized, and his name had been almost forgotten. And I think of him as a real saint in the truest sense. I miss him very much, and his contributions were enormous.
It's a wonderful tribute to Tom Stoddard. Antonio?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, I think his work is what has made, a lot of Lambda Legal has certainly honored him, but his work, someone else, very revolutionary and very much a visionary in terms of rights for queer people. So absolutely, as we expand the list, St. Tom does go on there. Absolutely.
We're going to run out of time soon. I'm just going to go through some other names. One from a text. Listener put in multiple ones. St. Hansberry, St. Fornus, St. Sontag. There are so many gay/dyke women writers I have on my wall, the person writes, who I call to for inspiration when I ache for a place to have belonged in history. Nicely put. I see that in your book you mention artists like Oscar Wilde and Keith Haring, in addition to Baldwin, who he mentioned, activists like Marsha B. Johnson in New York, Harvey Milk in San Francisco, icons like Marlene Dietrich and Judy Garland, who came up earlier, also Princess Diana. And there are lesser-known saints in the book, like Mae Morris or Magnus Hirschfeld. You want to pick one of those as we get ready to go out the door here?
Yes, of course. So Saint Magnus Hirschfeld was a sexologist. He was a German Jew who was not only, beaten down for his work with Jewish people, but for his work with the queer community, the LGBTQ community. But his work really shows the embrace. He embraced the queer community. He focused on health and well-being, fitted to the times that he was in. And he absolutely, he advanced his research, including the opening of the Institute for Sexual Research in Berlin. He co-wrote and acted in films that portrayed, gay men in a more a sympathetic light. So, and in its heyday, the Institute, was home to a lot of scientific research, artistic pursuits, education, advocacy. And it provided a very safe space for gay men, for lesbians. And of course, Magnus himself was gay. So he offered a lot of hope to queer people, but he offered a lot of care, not only physically and medically, but, literally in terms of or spiritually in terms of their hearts and their minds and needing comfort in a very spiritual sense. So he's someone that many people are not familiar with. And that's why I was so pleased to have him in the book.
Hey, what do you hope will come of this book, or that this book will do, besides kind of like we've been doing, listing a lot of names and people saying, yeah, go, that person, or you're my saint, I've looked to you for inspiration. What's the goal of this book as you see it?
The goal, it's a couple of goals. I think the goals will, during this month, as we start off Pride, I think it'll remind people that Pride itself, there's a spiritual aspect to Pride, and that the book will also give people a sense of hope, especially queer people, when we're looking for examples, looking for ways to practice spirituality that is a bit broader than perhaps a named, or institutionalized religion, and we'll remind them of what I say in the book, that you go to the altar and you're altered, and your altar can be anywhere. It's also within you. So I hope it gives people a reminder about the contributions that queer ancestors have made, not only during Pride Month, but in everyday life. There are saints here that have impacted every aspect of our lives today, whether you're queer or not. So I want the book to be seen by certainly queer readers, but by all readers and all people, because it shows, that queer is the identity of the brave, and that courage and that sense of bravery is here to stay, and it will continue.
Antonio Pagliarulo's new book is Queer Saints, A Radical Guide to Magic, Miracles, and Modern Intercession. Thanks so much for sharing it with us. We really appreciate it, Antonio. Happy Pride Month.
Thank you.
Brian Lehrer on WNYC, and now your calls and texts. If you are tweens or teens or parents of those, to give other listeners a language lesson in things folks are saying today that the grown-ups, may not know. Gary and Benjamin, I think this is a father and son together on Staten Island. Hi, you're on WNYC.
Hi, Brian. Long-time listener. Thank you for taking our call. But Benjamin's actually my younger brother, and once he heard this topic, he heard that we had to call in about the term 6-7. I see. I'm 21 years old, and I already feel out of the loop on this. But the way I understand it, and I can give it to my brother to confirm, it's like a signal that the tweens are telling each other to kind of just be in the know. So whenever any sentence comes out, whenever they hear anything with the word 6 or 7 in it, they do the hand signal to each other, and it's just a thing to laugh about.
Yeah. Are you Gary or Benjamin, who was just speaking?
I'm Gary speaking.
So Benjamin, put some meat on those bones. What's 6-7 for you? Hey.
6-7 is just two numbers, but like there's also additions of 6-7. There's like 4-1, which are also two numbers, but it's basically just people laugh at it because everything has to do with 6-7.
In some way. I've heard 6-7 as meaning like, nah, like it's okay, like 6-7 out of 10. Something like that, or not really?
Yeah, kind of, if you put it in that perspective.
Gary and Benjamin, thank you for calling in. Kelly in Westport, you're on WNYC. Hi, Kelly.
Hey, Brian. So I've got a couple things here. Number one, maybe some other callers can enlighten me, but like Skibbity, Ohio, no clue at all. But the one that I really love, that I actually think is very cool, is Riz. Hey, that guy's got Riz. It's charisma.
Short for charisma. Kelly, thank you very much. We're getting a lot via text. Listener writes, our 13-year-old Ella Jane taught us chopped, means ugly, chopped, locked in, focused, Locked in is not new, though. They say that in sportscasting all the time. Oh, that Aaron Judge, he's locked in. But locked in is focused. Here's another one. My daughter will say the word clocking, as in, wow, you're really clocking us right now, meaning calling us out. And this says, my students, I guess this person is a teacher, also like to say, are we going to eat or nibble? As in, eat means winning or doing your best, and nibble just means kind of getting by. So are we going to eat or nibble? All right, another text. It's pretty clear, but something I've noticed about Gen Z kids up to and through middle school, they say search up or search it up for the internet. I first heard my 10-year-old say it, and my 15-year-old thinks it's strange, like I do. So there's a generation gap between the 10-year-old and the 15-year-old. But then working in schools in all 5 boroughs, I hear elementary and middle school kids using that turn of phrase too. All right, Noreen in New Livingston, in Jersey. You're on WNYC. Hi, Noreen.
Hi, my kids are going to kill me for dialing in and talking about this, but I'm the only one with teenagers in my friend group, so they're always getting asked. One thing they've been saying a lot is mogging, and it's supposed to mean someone who looks better than everyone else in the friend group or in the picture or whatever. But lately I've also heard them use it to mean someone who's playing better, like in a game or a sport. So it's evolving.
It's evolving, but it's actually doing better, either looking better or playing better. It's not just sort of like posturing as if you're better than others, right? It's actually doing better or looking better.
No, it's like a physical appearance, like someone looks well put together or prettier.
Got it.
Part of the whole looks matching ecosystem.
Thank you, Noreen. All right, we'll finish with some more texts. One is a few words my 9-year-old has recently been saying. Selling, loosely meaning selling out. Bro, not new, but B-R-O-H, they wrote it, P-O-V, like we discussed, and chopped. Another one referencing chop, meaning ugly. And one final text, I'm Berlin, a 6th grader, and currently we're saying tough, which he spells T-U-F-F, meaning cool or sick, and fries, meaning I'm cooked. And if you don't know what that means, it's basically, uh-oh. Thanks for listening to Brian Lehrer Weekend. We're back on the radio Monday morning at 10 a.m. In the meantime, follow us on Blue Sky at The Brian Lehrer Show, where there's always a conversation 24/7.